For a video companion to this podcast, as well as information regarding materials and equipment, log on to our YouTube.
Welcome, everybody, to Making Muppetland. This is episode 5, the finale. Nick, it's the finale. Brent, welcome, guys.
Yay!
Nick asked me before we started what's the agenda on today's show, and I call it landing the plane. I was going through footage yesterday as I was editing this last clip. You know, I put up that first clip for the first episode, which was backstory. And then as I started cutting these subsequent videos that kind of go along with the weekly episodes, I keep remining the footage of Brent and I building this ride. And Brent, I gotta tell you, there's so many things I would redo.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things. You know, we were semi-winging it off what we thought was the right direction, and in this case, you know, there was not necessarily a right direction. You know, there'd be things that we'd look at and then go later, oh, we really shouldn't have done that way, or wow, that worked out better than what we thought it was going to.
Even in the case of the Haunted Mansion, whether it was the TV monitors or just the fact that, you know, there was more to be done with the characters, bringing them more to life, animating them more. The projection room, I could have spent, because we only had what we had, I could have spent days playing with the contrast and making those projectors cleaner. And if I'm being really honest, to what end? I'm sure you feel the same way. I've gotten the lesson. People got the result in respect to seeing a video and kind of getting the full ride of what we were doing. But now all I want to do is pour that into this next place we're building. I'm not really... There's a couple things I could see that might be fun to do. There's a couple things that might be fun to do with the castle, just because it would be a good exercise in projection and a little more tuning of the mapping elements.
Right.
Only in respect to carrying that forward to something else, because it's already sitting there. But everything that I look at that I'd like to do better, the transparent LCD screen, I'm just ready to pour it into the new place.
Right.
I don't want to go back and redux, but it's tempting. And I could see why some of our favorite filmmakers have been so tempted to go back into their movies. And it's not just George Lucas. But I mean, how many versions of Blade Runner are there? I can see the temptation to just... Because we could, right, Brent? We could go in, we could keep making it better, posting new videos. I just can't allow myself to go down that road.
I think that we are creating such a environmental piece that allows you to step into the environment and take the journey, that it doesn't mean that a year down the track or 2 years down the track that you can't step in and modify sections of it to change your thought process, to add something different. I feel like we've got that opportunity, though, to do that. And I feel like that is the kind of thing that we can be doing.
The funny thing about that is that really just is the saved program file and the hardware.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get to update that. But it also means that the technology might update. The projector technology might update. You may want to play with something a year from now. The computer technology, the hardware technology may update. And it doesn't mean that we can't just pull out and replace it, but it does mean we can pull that out, replace it, and test out new technologies and new techniques that we can initially add in and keep things interesting and vibrant and different.
The idea is to now take, and we talked about this the other day, sort of take each section of Muppetland and use that now as a springboard for kind of research and developing all these different lanes that we want to keep, all these different sandboxes that we want to keep playing in. So now we're going to do all of those things instead of doing what you just said to Muppetland. We're going to do, and we're not even sharing all of this detail yet with people because we're still working through it. But we're going to pour all that stuff into a new place, and instead of going back and upgrading the projectors and doing it to a property we don't own in a place that we can't open to the public. We're going to take it and put it in an environment where when we go to make that projector upgrade and we go to reskin it the way you're talking about,
Right.
Brent, you know, it's with purpose. Because if you actually are going to open up something like this to the public, it can't be static.
Right.
It's got to evolve.
Yes.
And I think that's the coolest lesson. Like, you and I have talked about all the different ways we would change that projector room. And now we're going to take all those variables, and some are going to go into 1/3 of the place we're building, and some are going to go into the other side, and so on. And as these new technologies evolve, we'll have the warehouse space to run with them, which is where, you know, Nick comes in, obviously, because I think we're going to be. I have no idea what new projector technology is going to be. I think we're kind of sitting in a space for a while now with all the stuff that's been going on, that, you know, it's going to be now about moving the actual projector, which we started to do, Brent, with the Mickey Mouse, albeit on a slow linear.
Right. Yeah. So
but I think that's the next step.
When you're saying moving the projector, you're saying building it into the technology that moves it along with it.
Yeah. Well, that's one version of it. Yeah, like in the Runaway Railway, which I reference, you know, a bit as we built this thing. They've got a whole vehicle that's got, you know, goofy. Well, that's like a projection map and a TV.
Yeah.
It's a transparent TV. But the idea, yeah, a rig with a projector that moves.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that's cool about all that stuff to me is that, again, you can teach that to people. It's accessible. Anybody can get an Adobe license at home, and they can open up After Effects or some off-the-shelf program and do projection stuff. And you can get a projector on Amazon for $100.
Right.
But it's all the other aspects of it. To me, it's the control. It's teaching people how to make it talk. It's all that synchronicity. It's tying into the lighting, tying it into the ride control. So in this new environment, what I'm hoping is not only are we going to let people come ride a ride, but be able to learn all those different facets and then take home those experiences. So it's kind of an amalgamation of everything we've done so far. I prefer to take all those experiences and lessons and pour them into that. I mean, like I said, I could think of 100 things we should be doing differently with Muppetland. But if we're not going to open it to the public and we're not going to show it to anybody, then aren't we just doing it for ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I found it way more interesting when we were in the new space the other day, looking at what could be. And then you mocked up that model in the computer.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just way more interesting to me to go, well, what could be here?
Right.
And then if you've learned from Muppetland that something with the projectors that wasn't satisfying or could have been done better, you know, we'll reapply it. But I don't know. It's been an interesting journey. I want to thank everybody who has gone with us on this journey. If you've made it to this episode, I want to thank you in particular, because you've more than likely been with us since the first video. And this has been a discovery process, a learning process. And, you know, look, it's been a rough year for everybody. So this hasn't necessarily been an easy process. This has been something in many ways that we've done, not just as a learning experience, but as a way to sort of fill a void. There's been a lot of unknowns this year. Which almost made it a little bit easier to tackle some of these things, Brent, because it's like when you don't know what's happening with your business and your livelihood, then how hard could it be to figure out how to make 3 projectors work together, or a train roll around a track? Like,
yeah.
So that's my opening monologue. That's what I'll call that. That's my opening monologue. But Brent, what do you think was in respect of pouring those lessons into the new place, what do you think is going to, for you, what do you think is like the most exciting aspect that lay ahead? Because we're talking about 6 months from now, theoretically. We don't know what's going on with the COVID of it all. But what to you is the most exciting part of the journey that lay ahead?
The initial part for me is that we're starting to bounce around the story. What is the story going to evolve about in this new place? What do we want to take an audience into when we step into this new place? That's when I my brain starts sparking with all these different ideas about how we're going to create something, to what we decide we want to go with. Once we get that, it's really just all about the assembly and construction of it, which is, interesting, but can be a little boring. I love the discovery of what we are going to try to present to people in the initial starting design process.
I was going through my files the other day. You had drawn this mock-up that was like, I don't know, it was like a vending machine and a kiosk thing or whatever, and then up top was the monkey.
Right.
And it was drawn in such a way that it was like, it's like the picture glows. It was like very neon and popping, and I thought, wow, that's something like Brent took and like colorized on the iPad or whatever. Imagine now taking that style that Brent draws and applying it to projection, and how things that we would once need to build, whether it be at model scale or at full wall height, might now be replaced with something that you're going to digitally do in an iPad.
Right.
And some of that's going to be, birthed out of the fact that that's what we're looking to do technique-wise. But in other areas, it might just be a problem solve. None of us, I think, in respect to the stuff we're talking about doing, consider ourselves experts. Like I said, and I've said this on probably every episode, we're very open about learning and sharing that process with everybody. But I think if we were moving forward and I was like purely confident in what we're doing and felt like there would be no hurdles, that would be dangerous. I recognize that there are these moments of self-doubt. So it's all on you is what I'm trying to say, Brent. I saw that picture and realized that we'll be fine. Brent will draw it. So that's really a long road to a compliment. But it was, and it's a shame too, because we're never going to build that, by the way. We're never going to build that thing that you drew. But again, there's a lesson inside of it. So.
Well, that's part of the design process in general. I mean, as a designer working with a director or with a team of people, you bring forward what you want to bring forward. You eventually agree on an idea and you try to present it. And you always end up by putting forward something that you should be willing to also let go, because sometimes what you end up with is not necessarily the final result that you put down in that drawing. And as a designer, you learn to let it go and you move on and you go into a new design element. There are times in the past where I've redesigned something that I still look back and go, well, I feel my original concept was still a little bit better. I enjoyed it more to work with, but it's up to the client as to what the client does, wants in the end. In this case, we were forced in a situation that we worked together and what we really liked, but the situation evolved from, where we were going into COVID, where we had to drop our initial ideas and have to let it go to move on to something now, which has opened up a new opportunity to make a change in that idea. And I mean, the big thing is where did we go from doing what we originally designed to now as a new, completely slightly, different setup to what we imagined from, a year ago. Because a year ago we had something completely different that we would have moved forward with completely if COVID hadn't happened and things moved forward the way they were. And now we've got a completely different idea. And part of that, I think, was just a bit more time in able to experiment with other things that we didn't have before or didn't think of before. And our thoughts and our ideas evolved into something what we would consider now better than what we had a year ago as to put out there.
And we haven't really shared any of it yet for good reason, and we will, so stay with us. But it's more, especially coming out of COVID, it's more fulfilling. And I think this place we're building is going to be more inspiring for people. I certainly think it is for us. I've said this before as well. I love the shorthand. I love that even if we designed a whole place that we never got to, build and share with people, there are these elements now you can point to. Well, why don't we do it the way we were going to do that? Why don't you draw that the same way with the same style and aesthetic as you did this.
Right.
So, and I'll show you that photo. You'll know what I'm talking about.
I know which one you're talking about.
The up front, it's very green and red.
Yeah,
It's got the monkey
it
up
was,
top.
it was the green was too green. It was very neon green almost, and it was a change of. It was where we were sitting back and going, "This is the general direction." But yeah, I'd changed the color a little bit, so it was a bit more pushed back. But yeah.
But now knowing if you were taking that aesthetic and projecting with it, it needs to almost be that blown out of a neon for it to even register at all.
Yeah.
Like, you know where that translation is, at least with the
Right,
projectors we're using.
Yeah. Well, that's the
You know.
thing. Yeah. I mean, again, that's the other thing is, we're working with these projectors where two of them are a higher grade than the third one. So we're looking at what we're doing, and it's interesting to take the technology. I mean, Nick, the technology of using different technologies in the same, older technologies and newer technologies, trying to make something happen and make it all look the same is very difficult these days. It has to be all the same technology side by side. You can't use an older product, right? It makes it in your thought process,
Oh, of course. I mean, it's, especially with what I do with lighting. I do a lot of things, but the primarily focus is like lighting and some of the stuff like that, where yes, I mean, and especially now as most, if not all, lighting effects in general, just fixtures and stuff, are making that transition to LED. You might say, oh, this is a red LED,
Yeah.
but it might have different shades of red depending on when it was manufactured or
Right.
the quality of the stuff, components.
Which can off balance your overall visual, right? And you sit back and you go, what's wrong there? And you realize it's that one light.
Yep.
That's an older technology that you have to bring up to the table with the other technologies at that point.
And it's definitely bitten me before. And you do your best to make it work if you don't have the option of
which is what we're doing here with the projectors.
Yeah, exactly.
And as we move forward, we're about to move forward, so we're going to get the same type of projector and the same technology side by side. So you've got an even blending of video image that we do want to produce. That's part of the fun.
And none of the projectors that we're using have edge blending built in. You can buy three of the same projectors, Epson projectors, slightly higher grade, and they'll all have built-in edge blending. So, look, the limitations we didn't start building this ride with a budget or a plan. It was, we looked around and we were like, can we do this? Well, what else are we going to do? You know? So taking it now and making it real, like, is a whole different set of variables. I'm more concerned about, getting OSHA approval and all those things than I am, edge blending on a projector now. In other words, we might have spent a half a day going through an issue that, like I said last time, was what I like to call an artificial issue. Now that goes by the wayside. We just buy the right projectors. We put them up in the warehouse first. We trial it. We make sure we're happy. We move on. But I was happy to see that when we started this thing only a few months ago, I was happy to see that there was a response. I didn't think posting that video would really yield the response it did. I'm glad it did. I think there's a lot of people out there that wish Disneyland was open. I think I woke up this morning and felt that way, to the extent that instead of having my coffee, I had a hot chocolate. I think I was like feeling that Disneyland withdrawal. But this is what we did. So we built a little bit of magic. I think what's really cool, and that's why I'm really excited to get Nick in the warehouse and hands-on, is all the interactive qualities to this, right? So it's not just a ride. It's not just going to be arcade games. There's going to be a whole lot more going on. But to build a place that you can interact with and engage with both on-site and online, and do it in such a way, speaking to what you were even saying about technologies, Brent, it's not just the idea of like, oh, if these projectors become outdated, we want to replace them all. I want to make sure everything we're doing, every story we're telling, everything we're trying to share in this place can grow and evolve.
Yeah.
That's an element that wasn't really there in the initial iteration. I think now, because of this pandemic, it's become more important that we make this place more of an inspirational environment, is what I'll say for now. But it's cool. It'll be fun, Nick, to get you. You know, I was thinking today, I was like, oh God, I really wish this. Why haven't I done this yet? And I'm like, because I only have 2 arms.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully, as COVID comes to a close, if you will, it'll be a little bit of time, obviously, but yeah, it'll make it a heck of a lot easier knowing that traveling and being around is safe again, or safer, you know. That, or I could just drive. It'll be one long drive to get out there.
That's a long drive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but we're, you know, what will inevitably happen here is we'll reach a point where all of the platforms and technologies will be identified, and even if, Nick, you are there, you'll be able to contribute. I mean, some of that programming can be done off site. One of the things I know Brant and I wish we would have done with Muppetland, I started to do it, was to bring all the animatronics into one room, program them first, and then disperse them.
Yeah.
You know, it would have been easier. And I think that's what we'll be, obviously, I know that's what we'll be doing this time around. So it'll be a little bit different when we've got everything sort of centralized and we can do programming. Because
that sort of thing takes planning too. You know, you sit down and you say, well, how long is the cable have to be between your little hub and the character itself? So you need to also make, you know, it's one of the things where you have to plan that ahead. You have to plan that your character is going to work with the cable being as long because it doesn't drain on power or something like that. Where am I going with this?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about the process of doing what we have to do for a mall is the floor plan will force some of those decisions to get made very early on.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll just allocate. Okay, let's just say we're going to have enough power here, 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 and here.
Yeah.
Versus the way you and I were doing Muppetland, Brent, where it's like you just put something up there because that's where we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And then it was like, how long do we need a wire now?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, but Royce, don't forget, like, this was your guys, especially you two, 100% was like really your first go ahead at this. So where you're saying, you know, you wish you had everything in one room, the program. Well, you were also learning the program. Well, now you have a better understanding of it, and you can do it you might be able to do it more remotely, you know, as well. Because I know I can program some lighting stuff without ever having lights in front of me, and I know what it's going to do because I've had so much experience both with the program and the lights. I mean, I'm sure having all the different animatronics and things, being able to set the timing and stuff is very important. But now you guys are many more steps ahead where it's, you know, it might not be second nature yet, but you know, you're going to be able to program stuff without having to see it directly or all the things in a row. You know, do it remotely and try it, and you now will know what to tweak or how to change stuff, which also comes with time and experience.
You're also going to have hidden factors, though. You've got to know that if you're on a vehicle and the vehicle takes 10 seconds to get from A to B, that it is going to be 10 seconds before you activate the next animatronic, and you give that amount of berth in the actual show. And the thing is, you can guess that if you've got everything sitting in front of you as to how long that distance of time would need to be, and you can program it all for sure. But until you actually put it there, you're going to have to make adjustments and tweaks once the physical ride is up anyway.
But it's a lot easier to nudge.
Yeah, that's
around.
Yeah.
Now,
That's
Brent,
true.
this is something I haven't even said to you offline, so I'll say this to you on the show. One of the issues we were having was the Kermit in the wall would not reset. We had a linear servo.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Oh yeah.
And it would just and it's weird because Nick, you talk about being able to program remotely. So I got to the point where I knew if I just put a keyframe here and a keyframe there and drug it this way, that it would do that. And it did sometimes.
And then what you would see is this. You would see Kermit's eyes and head just go up, and then it would just randomly go down. And then when you least expect it again, it suddenly does this. It goes all the way up, and then it goes all the way halfway. And then it stops there, and you're like, why didn't you go all the way down?
But the timeline wasn't. The timeline was saying otherwise. The timeline was saying
Right.
you go from here all the way up. So I found out later that particular type of motor doesn't work perfectly with the software.
Okay.
With the hardware, really. It's not a software issue, it's a hardware issue. I didn't know that.
Huh?
That's also the motor we had. And it kind of worked,
Right. Oh, yeah.
but now I know. But so what that also does is gives me the confidence to know that what I was trying to blindly program the reset that should have worked as it did with other motors, that it will work. We just need to be using the right motor. But I mean, it's like a $40 linear servo that was already sitting in the warehouse. Now, when we hooked it up to an RC controller, it works no problem. But it's that you've now got a box with a protocol and it's trying to send it data, and it's how it plays with that.
Right.
So I have notes on how to replace those things. But that's something I haven't even told you about, Brent.
Yeah. That's good to know. At least you know what the problem is now with Kermit, because it was every single time up until a week ago. It was like, Kermit's not doing his thing. Why is he not doing it?
So now you know, Brent. That's the deal there. But that's again, we knew we'd figure it out eventually, and here I am telling you now. So that's one less thing to worry about later.
Yeah.
Nick, I think what'll also be interesting is how we can integrate some other programs, like some of the stuff you use, with the program I'm using. We were talking about expanding channels the other day, and it hadn't even occurred to me, knowing that they could play together, it hadn't occurred to me sort of where the budget savings is. And that's how I'm starting to look at things now, because I had this conversation with you about expanding channels, and you were showing me ways to do it that were kind of limitless.
Yeah, I mean, the way that a lot of these like software / hardware pieces communicate within themselves, they have a universal language where they can talk to many other things. And by having the lighting, let's just call everything, let's say everything has its own computer. So if there's the show controller computer, and then there's a lighting computer, and then there's like another special effects computer, in a way, they all can talk to one another. And the show control computer could tell the lighting computer, hey, I need you to do these literally like 2,000 things right now. Whereas, or I should say, that one cue is just literally one cue, but to the lighting computer, it interprets that one cue to make those 2,000 things go. And that's kind of where, I don't want to say the beauty of it is, but that's what gives you almost like a limitless, endless supply of just channels and effects and all that stuff. Once you establish that communication between the two, again, it's limitless. And I mean, it's limitless based upon what you actually have as far as, money and the equipment. But it is, in theory, it's basically limitless, the things you can make it all do.
I will go out on a limb, and I will say it is the beauty of it, because it is the beauty of it. You and I were talking the other night. I mean, I'm running numbers in my head really quick. Let's just say it's the potential for thousands of dollars in savings, because what happens is when you start expanding your lighting universes, okay, and in this particular case, Nick, and correct me if need be, we're talking what they would call ArtNet, So if we're expanding universes and I want to use a bunch of proprietary hardware that sort of locks me into, it's not a walled garden because you can get outside of it, but if I'm using the proprietary hardware that I have been using, then the boxes have certain limits. You can expand them with what they call nodes, and that's outside hardware that allows me using this protocol. It's not that it's a universal protocol, but it's universal within the context of lighting protocol. So now I can make an outside piece of hardware talk to this walled garden of hardware. And what that does for me as a business owner who's also trying to get into design mode, actually helps me budget. So I'm talking to Nick the other night, and I said, all right, well, look, we don't even really know what we're doing over here, but let's just talk in terms of foot or meters even. We were talking meters. And you realize very quickly how a universe of lighting, which is what, 500, a universe is 512, Nick?
Mm-hmm.
512 channels. One universe of lighting can get eaten up in a couple feet of LED tape if you're trying to do the right thing or the wrong thing, depending on your perspective. But very quickly, you can eat all this up. So what, and this is the value of having like a Nick on your team. So I'm on the phone with Nick, and I'm like, Nick, I don't really want to know what I don't really know what I want to do here. So just let's stay very like broad. And then we go, okay, let's talk about things in terms of doorways. A doorway is how many meters, whichever. If I'm trying to do individual pixel mapping, this many pixels per a foot, what have you. This is how much lighting. This is how many lighting channels you're going to eat up. And then I realize what that does from a cost perspective. And then when you turn around, you go, yeah, but if you do this and we run this over here, now suddenly a laptop and an application we've got that we've already paid for, and we have these cache boxes that are from arcade games that we use for things all over the shop. I've got a cache box of these nodes, these ArtNet driven nodes. And now suddenly I can expand my capabilities with stuff I'm sitting on, just knowing how to make it all talk. So that's why you need a lighting guy. That's why you need somebody that understands the language. That's not me.
Right,
I'm
but
just
it's
the guy that knows to find the guy.
Well, yeah, but also again, it's not just the lightning stuff either. Whereas we talked about how we could use the DMX interface, the DMX language, to control other things like motors, fans. I mean, you could have it control a fog machine, a fire machine. It can control literally just about anything you could theoretically plug into it. But through DMX, you're able to implement many things that you may have thought you weren't able to do so, just by depending on what you're basically plugging into the whole system, that whole dialogue in a way. So yeah, it gives you that much more opportunity to add more fun, cool things.
It's look, you messaged me a couple weeks ago and you said, hey, I think we should build a hurricane simulator. And it could all be done with DMX.
Yes, I did. I want to.
But it could be, right? I mean, that's the thing. So all you need is space. I've got some of that, kind of. But it's not like when you start to break down that idea, you go, okay, that sounds wild. Well, what would we need? Okay, fans, motors, all of that can be run on a DMX backbone.
Yeah.
So
and the beauty of it is, like, we already know that language, so we don't have to worry about programming or learning something new. Where, so if anyone out there is listening, like, oh, I know DMX. Well, great, because now you can control stuff with it as well as lights. Or you might say, I know Arduino well. Great. Now you can use Arduino to control other things you might have thought you might not have been able to do so. And that's kind of, again, the beauty of knowing a language and knowing how you can kind of use it outside the normal box rather than like struggling trying to learn something new, which is not a bad thing, but learn instead of the time that really takes to learn something new.
I think we should talk a little bit more about the hurricane simulator, because this is the kind of thing in a year or two that we could actually open to the public if we wanted to. And I've seen hurricane simulators, but this is obviously, if we do it, it's going to be way cooler because it should be a story-based experience. And it reminds me, if anyone's had done the Twister ride at Universal, it's not a ride. You walk in and you stand there and you hold the rail and they hit you with a bunch of fans, a couple blasts of mist, and then a giant cow flies by, Brent. It's probably just on an arm, obviously.
We could that'd be a fun thing to do as part of the ride itself. As you said, they're on the cart, they're going from A to B between point A and B, and you can have projectors of things happening above you and have that wind hit them as if it was a sudden burst from one place to the next, and it could be a fun little journey point that can be included under the ride, for example.
The hurricane takes you from A to B. You get swept away.
I could think of 100 ways to tie that in, but the funny thing is nobody in this conversation said it can't be done. Everybody just moved on to what it could be, and that to me is hilarious, because Nick just is like, sends me a link. What was it? It was on some auction site for one of those
some arcade going out of business. They literally had a hurricane simulator, and I sent Royce I'm like, have you ever seen this thing? Thinking it was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and it literally looked like two phone booths stuck together, and the one phone, just half of it was all solid machinery and stuff, and the other half was like this plexiglass phone booth you stand in, and it just blows a lot of wind on you.
I remember seeing those. Where were those? Where did they exist?
I remember seeing that.
That's it. That's where I think I saw it years ago.
And I've never seen it, and I'm like, that is the coolest thing. I want
two phone box booths, as you said. I remember seeing.
And I said to Royce, as he's like, there. I'm like, all right. I'm like, can I make? I'm like, and of course, like, I want to make that now, or at some point I need to make that. So, it's.
Well, it's way cooler to make it than because the one that's down there, I mean, aside from the fact that it's a stock device and it's old and you can fit a person in it, that's not what you're talking about. You obviously want to make it bigger and better.
Yeah.
You want to make a room.
Yes.
You want to do something like on a Universal Studios level, but this thing that you sent me is like, so when you really start to look at it, which is why it's so hilarious to me that nobody here is even doubting we can do it. When you start to look at it, what a great business that company was in. Because what are they selling? A power supply,
the wind
box
business
with some plastic on the front, and some fans on a timer, and a bill validator. Like, literally, there's a logic board in there. It's like a phone booth, like you said, with a high-powered fan. What a racket! And they probably got $25,000, $30,000 for that when they sold it. Now I'm depressed.
That's okay. Ours will be better. I promise you, it will be better.
Of course, it'll be better. The whole family will be able to get blown away, not just one person at a time. I mean,
and your little dog Toto too.
That's right. And then Brent will have the cow flying by, which will highlight the beef crisis and how that contributes to global warming. It'll all tie in ultimately. I know.
Yep.
But that is the and there you have it. That was real time creative process unraveling, because again, Nick sends me a text message like that, and Brent does it too. Brent will send me a message like, look at this, and I'm like, okay, I'm looking at it, and I'm waiting for the follow-up. We could build that. The other thing is I had a business that at its height, and we had rethemed it, Nick, I think when you had come out, it was year 2. That was when we first got into theming, and we had built this business, this arcade business. And at a certain point, I don't want to say it had maxed out, but between what we had accomplished in the warehouse, between the battles that we faced with the city, which is a whole nother story, you can look that up, and then the COVID of it all, we shouldn't even be here. What's left of this business shouldn't even be here, and there's not much left to it. And you truly saw, with our desire to learn something new, to challenge ourselves, to capitalize on our stubborn nature of not taking no for an answer, we built this ride. And yeah, Nick made a comment earlier in the show about, like, look, it's only kind of only your first one. It is only our first one, but we treat it like any other process. So I know I can say this on Brent's behalf as well, because I've known Brent long enough. We're going to criticize it like it's the 100th time we've done it. We don't give ourselves a free pass because it was something new. I think that's the journey, and I think it's okay. I think that's the ultimate lesson I want people to take away from this, is to embrace failure. And it's like the biggest cliche that you can ever hear in life, is that you've got to fail to succeed, and all of those lessons that you're supposed to learn with failure. But as somebody whose business has been knocked down twice in 2 years, I can tell you that without failure, you don't know what success looks like. So cliche or not, it's true. And the only thing that's really kept us here is your interest. It's been a journey based on your interest. That video going viral kept us going. I did not intend to truly build a full entire ride end to end. I did not intend to do a series of videos. I always said to these guys, it'd be cool, even talking about the old arcade, the one that never opened, that it'd be cool to have like a TV show where you're like showing people what you're building, and kind of use that as a jumping off point. And I think that this has been that learning experience in of itself. This whole Muppetland thing is a gift, and I will take it as such. So I want to thank the audience for that, because now what we'll do is the three of us will, in the new year, we'll start doing a weekly show. There's a lot coming. There's a name change, a new logo. There's a lot coming. We're working on it behind the scenes. But what we'll do is a weekly podcast. We'll do a weekly show. We'll do that very thing that I always wanted to do. So between YouTube and TikTok, you will get insight to what we're building, how we're building it, how you can play in the sandbox too, because that's a huge part of what we're doing. And then you can engage with us here. You can ask questions. Nick and I have been talking about doing some live kind of stuff. So just grow with us. If you've been here this far, then I would hope that you would stick with us. And I appreciate you coming with us this far. I want to thank you guys. Any last words for you guys?
Yeah, I was going to say, just thank you to the audience for following along on this journey, and hopefully follow along to the new journey. We're about to start some really cool new things over the next 6 months, and it's going to be hopefully quite the hoot. And hopefully you'll learn something from it. You'll get some experience from it, and learn as we learn, and see our successes and our possible failures, because we still have the ability of doing both along the way, but learning from them every single time.
Of course, it's failures. I mean, you and I, Royce, were talking about, well, before I even say that, like, again, we've said, at least in the past, failures are like access to move forward. Whereas you and I, Royce, were talking this past week about the SpaceX launch, how amazing it was. And inevitably the spaceship tried to land or crash and exploded, and people on the news, just for headlines, made it as if it was a tragedy. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is like, this is perfect. It went as great as it could because it's a prototype and they're learning. And now they're going to be able to learn and make it even better. But and that's kind of what we're all doing. But yeah, I was going to say, like, 2021 is going to be very exciting for all of us. I think we have a lot on our plates, and moving into the future, it's like, this is the way to make it really exciting.
I never thought I'd be in a position that my business would be opening at the same time as potentially Disneyland because we're both in the same damn category. And the only downside to that is we might be opening on a day where I'm going to want to go to Disneyland because it's been so darn long. But I will take that as another gift. That's all I can say because it's been a crazy year. So, and I'll leave it there. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Thank you to the audience. Please subscribe to our YouTube. Please go over to check out TikTok. Follow us on TikTok. And there will be a new podcast, so make sure that you subscribe to that as well. Stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Brent. And Happy New Year, everybody.